This happened back in February 2019 when I was 24 and working as a delivery driver for a local pizza chain in Burlington, Vermont. I've always been the type to push through bad weather. Grew up in Vermont, so snow never really fazed me. My manager, Dave, used to joke that I was the only driver who never called out when it snowed. Looking back, maybe I should have been less reliable that night. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It was a Tuesday evening, and the weather forecast had been calling for heavy snow all day. By 6 p.m., it was already coming down pretty hard, but nothing I hadn't driven through before. Most of the other drivers had called out or left early, so I was making decent money on tips. People were generous when you were the only one willing to deliver in a blizzard. Around 8:30 p.m., I got an order for the outskirts of town, a farmhouse about 20 minutes away on Route 116. The address was 2847 North Road, way past where the streetlights ended. I remember Dave asking if I wanted to skip it, but the order was for $63, and the customer had left a $20 tip on the app already. I told him I'd be fine. The drive out was worse than I expected. The snow was falling so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead, and the roads hadn't been plowed in hours. My phone GPS kept cutting out, but I knew the general direction. I passed the last gas station around 8:50 p.m. and headed into what was basically farmland and forest. About 15 minutes in, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it, someone else heading home, probably. But after a few minutes, I realized they were staying right on my bumper. I mean close. Maybe 20 feet back, which in those conditions was way too close. I slowed down, thinking they'd pass, but they slowed down too. The road out there was narrow, one lane in each direction with no shoulder, just snow banks and trees. I sped up a little and they sped up. My heart started beating faster. I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe their headlights were broken and they were following my taillights to see the road. But something felt wrong. I was about 5 minutes from the delivery address when my phone completely died. It had been at 15% when I left, and the cold must have killed the battery. No GPS, no way to call anyone. The headlights were still right behind me, high beams on now, flooding my rearview mirror with blinding white light. That's when I saw the turnoff for North Road. The mailbox number said 2847. I pulled into the driveway and the car behind me stopped on the road, engine running. I could see it idling there through the snow, headlights pointed at me. The driveway was long, probably a quarter mile, winding through snow-covered trees. I drove slowly, checking my mirror every few seconds. The car on the road hadn't moved. I couldn't see the house yet, and I was starting to wonder if this was even the right place. Then my car started sliding. I'd hit a patch of ice under the snow and went straight into a snowbank. The front wheels were completely buried. I tried revering, but the tires just spun uselessly. I was stuck. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to think. The pizza order was in the hot bag next to me, 2 large pizzas and breadsticks. The customer had paid online. I could just leave the food and walk back to the main road, but it was at least 2 miles to that gas station, and the blizzard was getting worse. I decided to walk up to the house. Maybe they had a phone I could use, or maybe they could help me get unstuck. I grabbed the pizza bag and got out. The wind hit me immediately, so cold it hurt to breathe. Snow was already piling up on my car. I walked up the driveway, following the faint tire tracks I'd made. The trees on either side were thick, their branches heavy with snow, creaking in the wind. It was so dark I could barely see anything except when lightning lit up the sky. Thunder snow, we call it in Vermont. It only happens in the worst storms. After about 5 minutes of walking, I still couldn't see the house. My feet were freezing and snow was getting inside my jacket. I stopped and turned around, thinking about going back to the car, and that's when I saw him. A man was standing about 30 feet behind me in the driveway, just standing there in the snow, wearing a dark jacket with the hood up. No flashlight, no movement. He'd been following me. My stomach dropped. I called out, "Hey, do you live here?" No response. He just stood there completely still. I started walking faster toward where I thought the house should be, looking back every few steps. He was following me, matching my pace, staying the same distance behind. My mind was racing. Was this the customer? Why was he acting like this? And where the hell was the house? I started jogging, the pizza bag banging against my leg. The snow was deep and I kept stumbling. When I looked back again, he was closer. Maybe 20 feet now. I could see his face in the darkness, pale, expressionless, eyes just staring at me. I broke into a run. I didn't care about the pizza anymore. I dropped the bag and ran as fast as I could through the snow. My lungs burned from the cold air, and I couldn't hear anything over the wind except my own breathing and my boots crunching in the snow. Then I saw lights ahead the house, finally. It was a small farmhouse with 2 lit windows. I ran toward it, slipping and falling once in the snow, scrambling back up. When I reached the front porch, I pounded on the door. "Help, please, someone's following me." I looked back down the driveway. I couldn't see him anymore, just falling snow and darkness. The door opened. An elderly woman stood there, maybe 70, looking confused and alarmed. "What on earth?" "Did you order pizza?" I gasped, trying to catch my breath. She shook her head. "No, dear, we don't order delivery way out here." My blood went cold. "You're 2847 North Road." "No, honey, we're 2447. 2847 doesn't exist. This road only goes up to 2500. I felt like I was going to throw up. It was a fake address. Someone had placed a fake order to get a driver out here. The woman let me inside and let me use her landline to call 911. Her husband helped me warm up while we waited. The police arrived about 45 minutes later. The roads were barely passable. They went down to check my car and found it empty. The pizza bag I dropped was gone too. They searched the area but didn't find anyone. The officer told me they'd had reports of fake delivery orders in rural areas over the past year, usually targeting drivers during bad weather when they'd be alone and vulnerable. They never caught anyone. Dave picked me up around midnight. I quit the delivery job 2 weeks later. I still think about that figure standing in the snow, watching me. Who was he? What would have happened if I'd never reached that house? I never found out, and honestly, I don't want to know. I guess the lesson is trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And never, ever take a delivery to an address you haven't verified, especially in the middle of a blizzard. I never believed in the whole trust your gut about people thing until what happened during the blizzard in February 2021. I was 25 and living alone in a small apartment complex in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've always been pretty independent and never had a problem living alone, even in a city where I didn't know many people. My apartment was a 1-bedroom unit on the 2nd floor of a 3-story building with maybe 20 units total. I'd been living there about 4 months when the blizzard hit. The forecast was calling it a historic storm, 3 days of continuous snow with wind chills hitting -30. The city basically shut down. Everyone was told to stay home unless it was an emergency. My neighbor directly below me was a guy named Eric. I'd only met him once or twice in passing, quiet guy, maybe late 30s, worked from home doing something with computers. We'd exchange polite hellos in the hallway, but that was about it. He seemed normal enough, maybe a little awkward but harmless. The snow started Friday morning. By noon, there was already a foot on the ground and it just kept coming. I'd stocked up on groceries, so I was set to just stay in and work remotely. My apartment was cozy, and honestly, I was kind of enjoying the excuse to not go anywhere. Friday evening around 7 p.m., I heard a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Eric standing there. I opened it. "Hey," he said, holding a plate of cookies. "Made too many, thought you might want some." It was a nice gesture. The cookies looked homemade chocolate chip. "That's really sweet, thank you." "No problem. We're all stuck inside, might as well be neighborly, right? I'm right below you if you need anything." I thanked him again and closed the door. I ate one of the cookies later. It was actually pretty good. I figured maybe Eric was just lonely and bored, trying to be friendly during the storm. Saturday morning, I woke up around 9 a.m. and went to make coffee. As I was walking through my living room, I noticed something odd. There was a small stain on my ceiling, right above where my couch was. It looked wet, like maybe something had leaked. I grabbed a chair and touched it, definitely wet. I went downstairs and knocked on Eric's door. He answered pretty quickly, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. "Hey, sorry to bother you, but I think there might be a leak from your apartment into mine. There's a wet spot on my ceiling." His face went pale. "Oh, yeah, I'll check on that. Thanks for letting me know." He closed the door pretty quickly. I went back upstairs and forgot about it. That night around 11 p.m., I was watching TV when I heard something. A faint scraping sound coming from above my bedroom. Not above in the apartment, above mine, above as in my ceiling itself. Like something was moving in the ceiling space between floors. I muted the TV and listened. There it was again. Scrape, scrape, pause. Scrape, scrape, pause. It moved slowly across the ceiling from one side of my bedroom toward the living room. I called the building manager, a woman named Paula who lived on the first floor. She sounded half asleep. "There's probably an animal in the walls," she said. "Squirrels sometimes get in when it's cold. I'll have someone check it out when the storm clears." But it didn't sound like a squirrel. It sounded bigger, heavier, and it was moving too deliberately, like something was crawling through the space between floors. Sunday morning, I noticed the wet spot on my ceiling had gotten bigger, and now there was a smell, faint but definitely there. Sweet and chemical, like cleaning products mixed with something else I couldn't identify. I went downstairs to Eric's apartment again. I knocked several times, but he didn't answer. I could hear music playing inside, classical music, pretty loud. I knocked harder. Finally, the door opened a crack. Eric looked terrible. His hair was messy, his eyes bloodshot, and he had what looked like paint or plaster dust all over his shirt. "What?" he snapped. "The leak is getting worse, and there's a smell. Is everything okay in there?" "I'm working on it," he said. "It's fine, don't worry about it." "I'm just concerned because..." I said it's fine. He shut the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, completely taken aback. That wasn't the same guy who'd brought me cookies. Something was seriously wrong. That night the scraping sounds got worse. They were constant now, moving back and forth across my ceiling, right above where I was trying to sleep. I lay in bed, staring up, listening to this deliberate, methodical scraping sound. Around 2 a.m., I heard drilling. Someone was using a power drill below me in Eric's apartment. It went on for maybe 20 minutes, then stopped. I couldn't take it anymore. I went downstairs and pounded on Eric's door. "Eric, what the hell is going on? It's 2 a.m. No answer, but I could hear movement inside. Footsteps, something being dragged across the floor. "I'm calling the building manager," I shouted through the door. I called Paula. She was annoyed but agreed to come up. It took her about 15 minutes to get to Eric's unit. By then, I'd been standing in the hallway waiting. The sounds inside had stopped. Paula knocked. "Eric, it's Paula, open up." "Nothing." She used her master key and opened the door. The smell hit us immediately, that same chemical smell, but much stronger. The apartment was dim, lit only by one lamp. There was plastic sheeting covering the floor in the living room, and tools scattered everywhere: a drill, a saw, buckets of paint and plaster. "What on earth?" Paula muttered. But Eric wasn't there. The bedroom door was closed. Paula called out again, then opened it. The bedroom was empty too, but there was a ladder set up in the middle of the room, going up into an open panel in the ceiling. My ceiling, the space directly below my apartment floor. Paula and I just stared at each other. She immediately called the police. The officers arrived about 40 minutes later. The roads were still terrible from the storm. They searched Eric's apartment and the ceiling space. What they found made my blood run cold. Eric had cut a hole in his ceiling, my floor, and had been crawling up into the space between floors. He'd created a small area where he could lie flat, directly above my bedroom. There were blankets up there, a pillow, and a flashlight. There were also photos of me, dozens of them taken through my windows with a zoom lens. Me cooking, me watching TV, me sleeping. They found Eric 2 hours later in the building's basement laundry room, hiding behind the machines. He didn't resist arrest. He just kept saying he wanted to be closer to me, that he needed to watch me, to know I was safe during the storm. I found out later that Eric had a history. He'd been arrested for stalking in another state 3 years earlier, but the charges were dropped. The background check the landlord had run didn't show it. I moved out the next week. I stayed with a friend until the storm cleared, and then I broke my lease and found a new place. I couldn't stay there knowing he'd been up there, above me, watching me while I slept. The worst part, that wet spot on my ceiling. The police said it was probably from him sweating while lying up there for hours, or from a drink he'd brought up. He'd been there multiple times before I even noticed. I still have nightmares about those scraping sounds, about lying in bed, completely unaware that someone was inches above me, separated only by some drywall and insulation, watching through the gaps. This happened in March 2018 when I was 27 and working as a marketing coordinator in Denver, Colorado. I've always been pretty social. I'd go out with coworkers most Friday nights to this bar called the Brass Tap on Larimer Street. It was our regular spot, nothing fancy, but the drinks were good and it had a laid-back vibe. There was this bartender there named Marcus. He was probably in his early 30s, tall, athletic build, covered in tattoos. He was friendly enough, always remembered our orders, made small talk. A few of my coworkers thought he was attractive, but something about him always made me slightly uncomfortable. I couldn't put my finger on it. He just stared a little too long, stood a little too close when taking orders. In early March, a major snowstorm was forecasted for Friday night. My coworkers decided to skip our usual night out, but I'd had a rough week and wanted a drink. I texted a few friends to see if anyone wanted to join, but everyone was staying in. I decided to go alone, just for 1 or 2 drinks. The bar was nearly empty when I got there around 8 p.m. Marcus was working, along with one other bartender I didn't recognize. I sat at the far end of the bar and ordered a vodka soda. "Brave coming out in this weather," Marcus said, sliding me the drink. "Your friends bail." "Yeah, they're all wimps," I joked. He laughed, but his eyes didn't. "Well, I'll keep you company then." The thing is, he did. He kept coming over every few minutes, even when I was clearly on my phone or not engaging. He asked about my job, where I lived, if I had a boyfriend. I gave vague answers. I didn't want to be rude, but I also wasn't interested in a long conversation. Around 9:30, the other bartender left for the night. Now it was just me, Marcus, and 2 other customers at the opposite end of the bar. The snow outside was coming down heavy. I could see it through the windows, already several inches deep. I finished my second drink and asked for my tab. That's when Marcus said, "You're not driving, are you? It's pretty bad out there." "I only live about 10 blocks away. I'm walking." His expression changed. 10 blocks in this, that's not safe. Why don't you wait it out? I'll make you another drink on the house." "I'm fine, really. I've walked in worse." I paid and put on my coat. As I was leaving, Marcus called out, "Be careful out there. Text me when you get home so I know you made it safe." I hadn't given him my number. I turned around. How would I text you? He smiled and held up his phone. From the last time we all came in, you left your card and I needed your number to call you back about it, remember? I didn't remember that and I didn't think it had happened, but I just nodded and left. The whole interaction felt off. The walk home was brutal. The snow was up to my knees in some places, and the wind was cutting right through my coat. The streets were empty, everyone had already gone home. I lived in a neighborhood called Capitol Hill, mostly apartments and townhouses. Usually there were people around even late at night, but the storm had cleared everyone out. I was about 6 blocks from home when I noticed someone behind me. I glanced back and saw a figure maybe half a block away, walking in the same direction. I couldn't see details in the dark and snow, but they were definitely there. I picked up my pace, so did they. I turned down a side street, not the direct route home, but I wanted to see if they'd follow. They turned too. My heart was pounding now. I pulled out my phone to call 911, but my hands were so cold I fumbled it and it fell into the snow. I picked it up, but the screen was black. The cold had killed the battery. I started running. My apartment was still 4 blocks away. The snow made it hard to move fast and I kept slipping. I could hear footsteps behind me getting closer. I cut through a parking lot between buildings. There was a shortcut. I sometimes used an alley that would save me 2 blocks. It was dark and narrow, but I didn't have a choice. The alley was barely lit, just one flickering streetlight halfway down. As I ran through it, I could hear him behind me, closer now. I could hear his breathing. I burst out the other side of the alley onto my street. My apartment building was right there, maybe 50 yards away. I ran harder than I've ever run, slipping twice but catching myself. I reached my building's door and yanked it open. Thank God it was unlocked. I stumbled into the lobby and turned around to look. He was standing at the edge of the sidewalk, right under a streetlight. It was Marcus. He was wearing his coat from the bar, hands in his pockets, just watching me. I ran up the stairs to my 2nd-floor apartment, locked the door, and shoved a chair under the doorknob. I went to every window and made sure they were locked. My roommate wasn't home. She was visiting her parents for the weekend. I found my phone charger and waited for my phone to turn back on. When it finally did, I had 3 missed calls from an unknown number and 2 text messages. The first text, "Hey, it's Marcus, just checking if you made it home okay." The second text, sent 10 minutes later, "Can see you're not answering. Hope everything's all right." I called the police. 2 officers showed up around midnight. I told them everything. They went outside to check, but Marcus was gone. They took a report and said they'd talked to him, but without any direct threats or evidence of attempted assault, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I file a restraining order. I never went back to the brass tap. I heard from a coworker that Marcus was fired about 2 weeks later, but I don't know if it was related. I also found out that another woman had complained about him months earlier. He'd followed her to her car after her shift, but nothing had come of it. I moved apartments 2 months later. I never saw Marcus again, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd taken that shortcut through the alley and he'd caught up to me, or if my building's front door had been locked. I was seconds away from finding out.